Hello you beautiful people, my name is Matt and today I bring you yet another new format on this channel. We're gonna review someone else's work and hopefully help them a little bit with their world building. At the moment I can only upload like once a month or so I would like to make this a regular in between bigger projects thing. So if you would like to have your thing reviewed in terms of world building and design or even writing, you're welcome to send it in or send me a link to it and I'll give you my thoughts and criticism. Have a look at the description if you want to participate and feel free to promote whatever it is you're doing and I'll plug it in the video. So hopefully I can help you out a bit too. So today's entry comes from Reddit user Purple Pilgrim. I stumbled upon his awesome looking map while browsing Reddit and saw some things that could be improved. So we talked a bit about his vision and I think his ideas were really good. So positive things first, he made this map in paint.net and everything is drawn by hand. And holy shit, it's amazing. Look at all these details. This must have taken forever and I'm really impressed by the coastlines in particular, as well as the rivers. It all looks very natural and great. Well done, great job. I couldn't have done it better myself. So what's there to criticize? Well, it's really mostly just realism things, so we could make this map a little more realistic, so I'm gonna explain how to do that. The first thing that caught my eye was this desert island. We're looking at part of a world map and we can very clearly see where the north and south poles are. This means that this island is right on the equator. As Purple Pilgrim told me, this planet is exactly like Earth, so realistically we would get a lot of rainfall on the equator. And this desert can't exist here. This is due to Earth's rotation and the Coriolis effect. I'll explain it in more detail in a future video, because I'm gonna be making a brand new fantasy world soon and I want you to follow along step by step and create your very own fantasy world. So if that's something that excites you and sounds fun to you, stay tuned. Anyway, so this desert doesn't belong here, but as Purple Pilgrim told me, it is important to the lore. So how can we make it work? Either we move this whole continent up a bunch until the desert is in the subtropical climate zone. Or we simply put a mountain range here, which will block a lot of humidity coming from the ocean. Why does that happen? Well, to put it simply, clouds don't like to climb. They would rather ditch their water on the other side of the mountain and carry on without it. Now, this solution is as much simplified as the explanation I just gave you, but it certainly makes this desert more plausible. There are some more problems with biome placement in my opinion, so here's my take on it. I didn't bother to make it super beautiful since it's just a quick example to make a couple points. First of all, I added a new color in between straight up desert and fertile lands. This beautiful vomit green is gonna represent semi-arid regions like savannas and steppes, and in colder climates, tundra and other less fertile areas. I also moved a lot of the biomes to different climate zones. So how did we get here? I'm sure you've noticed these big black lines. These are the borders of the wind cells that occur due to the Coriolis effect I told you about earlier. So we draw these in at the equator, at a latitude of 30 degrees, about here, and 60 degrees, so approximately here. For Earth-like planets that have a 24-hour day, these zones are always the same. And if your planet also rotates the same way as Earth, winds will blow east to west on the equator. So I like to make a little arrow to remind me. If you're working with a program that features layers, you can easily do all this on a separate layer that you can delete or make invisible later. Now, as I pointed out earlier, winds blow towards the equator in this cell. In the next one, it's reversed, and in the polar regions, it's reversed again. I'm not gonna touch on why this is the case in this video, since that goes a little too far. So after this video, if you're interested, check out the description where I linked some sources. But for now, let's keep going. So now that we know where winds are blowing, and with that where rain clouds are going, we can kinda gauge which regions are gonna have lush vegetation and which won't. But we can do one more thing to make it even more accurate. Ocean currents. Water will flow along the equator and heat up from a lot of sunlight, hot air and high air pressure. This warm water will be carried everywhere by ocean currents. And wherever winds blow over warm water, they carry humidity inlands, supporting life and vegetation. So we can expect greener regions there. Once these warm waters arrive in our next cell, they will be carried back around, by the winds blowing the other way. Meanwhile, they mix with cold waters from the polar regions and bring those back around, closing the loop. Wind blowing inland over cold water will be dry and cold and is more likely to produce dry regions like deserts. Wherever you have black arrows, the water will be mixed or neutral in temperature. In the next cell, this water flow will be reversed like this. Same rules apply, and all smaller gaps can be filled with smaller circulations. Lastly, in the polar regions, water basically flows in a circle in wind direction, so you can just close off your current circuits. Note that the further away from the equator, the colder the water will be in general. In a polar region, for example, you still have freezing cold water, even if it's a comparatively warmer stream. Once you have all this mapped out, it looks like a mess. But now we can find out where wind comes in from the oceans or major lakes, bringing some rain, and especially if it blows over warm ocean currents, it will pick up and carry more humidity. So a couple hours of checking arrows and changing colors later, and we have something like this. It could still be refined a little bit. This is just an example of where to roughly put your biomes. Now, I deliberately made some wrong choices here and there because Purple Pilgrim told me some things about his lore. In particular, he said that there is a desert nation here, so this desert has to stay. That's why we built this mountain chain, and above that there should be a prospering nation in a very green zone. Same here. Both of these regions are in a very bad place. There would normally be arid climate in these regions, and especially the top part here would be very dry. But what if this region, with its mountain ranges on top and bottom, acts like kind of a funnel? Maybe it could even create its own little climate, and maybe this island over here could profit from it as well. I think that's not too far-fetched, and it certainly goes well with the lore. Then over here on the far left, we have some kind of here be dragons situation, like the land that no one ever returns from. And if I understand correctly, it is supposed to be covered in thick forest. Now, normally this would be completely deserted, with wind blowing from what seems to be a massive landmass out of frame. This would look like the Russian tundra probably. So we agreed to place another mountain range, and let's just say that it barely catches the north winds blowing over this somewhat warm stream. So maybe it could rain a bit here, making it less of a tundra and more of a taiga with like a cold, dark and threatening coniferous forest. And in the end, there's supposed to be some magic going on here, so maybe that's helping wild forest growth as well. Also, this looks like chicken foot now, which was not intended, but it's pretty neat in my opinion. Anyway, the takeaway from this analysis is it's probably a good idea to start with a map before you have any lore. But if you do it the other way around, and you know, these things just kind of happen in a creative process, you can still try to make it realistic and work around your lore. Don't just discard your ideas if they don't work at first glance, and don't give up on realism if you want fantasy, because fantasy can always be functional. This map is a great piece of art, I love it, and we can totally make it realistic and still have it work out with already established lore. I hope you'll stick around for January 2022, where I'll teach you how to make your very own fantasy world. But we're gonna make it weird and exciting. It's gonna be part of my Uncreative Creations series, where we're gonna use completely random things to draw inspiration from. And I'm really stoked about it, and I hope so are you. And if you can't wait and you want to get into world building right now, you can check out the links in the description. Alright, that's it for today. Send me your stuff for future reviews, and feel free to throw me some lore as well. Again, links in the description. I hope I'll hear from you and see you next time. Until then, Muffin out.